Welcome to WBCS Adda. In the previous video, we read about the Regulating and the Pitt's India Act. Today, we are going to discuss the remaining important charter acts which were passed before 1857. So, the first one is Charter Act of 1786. What was the importance of this act and why this act was passed? This is one of the important question. Okay. See, after 1785, the Warren Hastings completed his term in his office. So for 1 year, the office of the Governor General was vacant. So Sir John Macpherson was appointed as an acting Governor General. Okay, but in 1786, Lord Cornwallis was appointed as a Governor General of Bengal. But he refused to came to India as a Governor General. Why? Because he wanted more powers and some supreme powers to the office of the Governor General. So, to fulfill all the demands of Cornwallis, the British Parliament passed the Act of 1786 and gave the Governor General immense power by assuming the role of Commander in Chief of Indian Forces. Now, the Governor General will assume the role of Commander in Chief of the Indian Forces. So, this act was nothing but it was passed in favor of Lord Cornwallis. Okay. Then the next act was Charter Act of 1793. This is important. This is an important act. Okay. This was nothing but the continuation of this act gave the permission to continue the company's rule over the British territory in India. Okay. This act just renew the Charter Act, the previous Charter Acts. Next point is the company's monopoly of trade for 20 years was granted. The British Parliament, what does it did? It gave the 20 years extension of monopoly power, 20 years of monopoly power of trading with India, and in return, the company was liable to pay rupees 5 lakh British pound to the British government. Okay. Next is all laws to be translated into Indian languages. This act stated that all the laws which were made should be translated into Indian languages. Okay. And it also laid the foundation of the government of written laws. For the first time after this act, the government of the written laws was formed and all the laws were interpreted by the court. Okay. After that, the expenses of the salaries, all the salaries which the board of the control, the members of the board of control were getting, would be borne by the Indian revenue. So these salaries became the burden on the Indian exchequer. Fine. Next, we have the composition of the board of control was changed. What was board of control? We have discussed it earlier that the board of control was a group of members who were supposed to look after the political affairs, right? So the members of these board of control were 6 in numbers, but now after this act it will be a 3-member body, 1 president with 2 junior members. Okay. Then the next point is the governor general can override the council's decision. Governor General got the immense power and he can override the council's decision. He is independent to take whatever decision he wants to take. Okay. And one more important thing, that the senior company officials, who were barred from leaving India, वो लोग इंडिया नहीं छोड़कर जा सकते थे without the permission of the governor general, and if they do so then they would be considered as their resignation. Okay. So all the company officials should have to inform the governor general before leaving their office. Fine. So all these were the important points relating to the Charter Act of 1793. Now we discuss the another important Charter Act, which was Charter Act of 1813. Fine. This was why this act was passed. First of all, this is the question, that why this act was passed. See, at that time the continental system of Napoleon Bonaparte was in vogue. Okay, Napoleon Bonaparte propounded this continental system, or he started this continental system, which states that it prohibited all the import of British goods into the French allies in Europe. Means all the French allies were barred or were prohibited to import any of the goods, British goods. Okay, so what does it did? इससे क्या हुआ? The British traders जो थे, they suffered a heavy loss. Okay, so all the traders jointly prayed and prayed against the in front of the British Parliament and asked for the abolishing of the monopoly of East India Company. Fine. So through this act, the British Parliament ended the monopoly of East India Company in India. Now all the private traders of the land can trade with India. Earlier, it was the monopoly power of the British and East India Company. Now, all the companies, other company apart from East India Company, can also participate in the trading lines. Okay, but the East India Company continue their monopoly power in tea, in the trade of tea, and also in trade with China. In trade with China, the East India Company continued their monopoly power. Fine. The next important point is the East India Company required to pay rupees 1 lakh annually on the education in India. It was a huge step taken by the British Parliament. Why? The British Parliament dictated the East India Company that they have to spend at least rupees 1 lakh annually on the education in India, because they are trading with India and they are getting more and more income, more profit from this country. So they should invest at least 1 lakh rupee on the education and on the revival of the literature over over this country. Okay, and spend the amount which is mentioned over here, that is 1 lakh, on the education in India. Fine. Then the next point is the last point. The Christian missionaries were allowed for the first time in India to promote. It was the first time that the Christian missionaries were allowed to promote their religion. They can preach their religion in India. Okay, after this Charter Act of 1813, and they were somehow successful in getting appointment of a bishop. Okay, they appointed a bishop for the British India and made Calcutta as its capital. Okay, so these were some important points, and all these were the important points regarding these three acts which we discussed in this video. That is the Act of 1786, then Act of 1793, and 1813. All these were passed before 1857. So I hope you like this video. If you like this, then please do share, and you can also subscribe our channel to get all the updates. Thank you so much for watching.